Joe, we didn't actually, we don't have a place card for you, neither were you on the agenda, but like surprisingly, pleasantly, you were in town. And yeah, so we exchanged a couple emails last night, and you're doing something very exciting. One of the fields, I guess, Sebastian was talking about in terms of autophagy, et cetera. Would you just be able to share a little bit about Retro, effectively what you're doing? Also, just like why you believe it's a pivotal moment, what you're doing in terms of partial reprogramming, pursuits on autophagy, and then obviously the collaboration with OpenAI.
Great, thanks so much for fitting me in at the last second. It's a pleasure to be here. Retro, we're about 80 people in Redwood City, California, and we are a multi-platform, target agnostic company going after a mission, which is to add 10 healthy years to lifespan using the biology of aging. And right now we're doing that through 3 separate programs we're taking to the clinic. And our first patient will be dosed on the order of a week. So that's going to be an exciting transition for us from discovery stage company to clinical stage company. So I can almost taste it. So let's see, I could talk a bit about the different programs we have and the science for them, but you asked about why now, I guess, and a little bit on AI. So zooming back, I would say the reason to work on aging diseases in particular is, I think, probably pretty obvious to everyone here, so I won't belabor it. The why is this happening now? I think it's because the academia is wonderful, but it's not necessarily super action oriented. So it has its place. I hire lots of academics, and then their brains slowly switch over to action mode, and it's beautiful to see. The academic field kind of, I mean, it had been going in, sort of that part of the exponential curve where you don't really see anything for a long time. And then right around the early 90s, when Cynthia Kenyon showed that you could change one gene in an animal and double its lifespan, that caught a lot of people's attention. And so people flooded into the academic field. So the academic field started building up. And like, lo and behold, it's this thing you can measure. There's all these different metrics. There's lifespan curves. You can modify them. We started getting sort of larger and larger general pictures of what aging is. And it kind of came of age right around the time that my second startup was winding up, such that there were a bunch of really exciting things to pursue. Finally, when I was first founding that second startup, there was like telomeres, which were like, yeah, not really a thing, and kind of winding down. And there were senescent cells, but it seemed like there's some good efforts in senescent cells. But boy, around 2020, ready. So I think it's like the exponential momentum of academia that caused now, and also the tools are just fantastic. Like also during the middle of that second startup, we saw the rise of kind of Illumina becoming the new microscope for biology, and so single cell RNA-seq and a bunch of very parallel methods that help us understand and sort of decode what's going on in biology better. And then so there's like this multi-step process. A bunch of entrepreneurs get involved, and then a bunch of people with capital get interested, and that kind of snowballs. So AI and what we're working on. So we're funded initially by Sam Altman, who wrote us a generous $180 million seed check about 4 years ago. And that's great. It funds us all the way through human proof of concept clinical trials. So approximately phase 2 clinical trials for each of the 3 programs we have going, which I can get to if we run out of time, if we don't run out of time. But that, as you might imagine, that access also allowed us to ramp up a pretty robust AI team at Retro. And it's pretty much always been my thesis for many years that biology is too hard for humans to figure out. No offense to the probably extremely brilliant humans in the audience, but there are 20,000 genes, and if I ask my favorite Harvard scientists questions about genes, the number they have in their head is probably like if they're really smart, like 40. But then these 20,000 genes are interacting with 20,000 other genes through roughly 1 million different protein distinct moieties in circulation, and it's crazy. So we decided to build a generative model based on LLM. We did this with OpenAI, and the target we chose, we sort of brought biological know-how and also labs for testing the results into the collaboration. And OpenAI brought a couple thousand H100s, which are GPUs that are, I would call, unobtainium, and know-how and training, and a bunch of enthusiasm for essentially their mission is to show that AI could be used for something that could find it like an insight or an invention that humans couldn't do alone. That's part of their, that's like, okay, we're achieving a step function in difference of creation for humanity.
And you've already been demonstrating that's been a very, very fruitful partnership. I believe you made an announcement in the summer.
The model we created, they called GPT-4B for bio, and it kind of had this sort of spine-tingly sort of Move 37 moment in it, if you follow the AlphaGo saga, where it generated these proteins, and we're like, okay, let's see if they're actually really proteins. But we cloned them into cells in a bunch of parallel experiments, and they were not only actual functional human proteins, like in different versions of them that have never been seen before. They were also massively rewritten in a way that most labs that are trying to tweak a protein for improved function could never do. Usually, you modify 2 or 3 amino acids in a protein. Proteins have 1 or 2,000 typically, but they were like up to 80% sequence dissimilar. But then they also perform, several of them, a lot of them actually performed much better than the sort of wild native human versions of proteins, some up to 50 times better at their function.
Which is extraordinary, by the way.
Yeah, it was like creepy.
That's incredible.
Kinda good.
Incredible. Just one last question before we wrap things up. This is a question I'm going to ask of, like, I'd say quite a few of the companies that are operating with, like, I would say, highly capable platforms such as the one that you have. Is there anything you think about in terms of like regulatory structure, market structure, things of the sort that like really withhold the potential of what you're able to do? Like, I could imagine sitting around at your organization, you must unearth extraordinary biological insights almost on a daily basis. And then there is the limitations under which you have to deal with, which is market-related capital, the pace at which regulatory approvals work, clinical trial recruitment, the fact that we still only exist within a disease-orientated paradigm for like developing therapeutics. Like, I mean, if you had a magic wand, what would you change? And I mean, what do you think the bottlenecks are in terms of the sort of the current system?
Well, I would characterize it slightly differently in terms of us sitting around, since we're like sort of maniacal, like Silicon Valley startup people who are trying to go as fast as we can within the context of biotech, which is otherwise shockingly and sadly slow. And we think that having something in the clinic within 4 years of founding is pretty good. Still seems really slow from the overall framing there. What does this industry need? What do we need? Speed is always the mantra. So the reason I'm here in the region is that the Abu Dhabi government is very speed and forward-looking oriented, and I think their willingness and interest in doing clinical trials in innovative areas is exhilarating and inspiring. So that's really cool. Also, we're in the middle of a fundraise that's going to close on January 20th. So there's also a fair number of people here who are very excited about longevity and AI-powered longevity from a capital perspective, and capital also helps systems move forward. So that I think that the tools are already here. regulatory infrastructures can slow things down. And so looking to venues where people are innovating on regulatory is great. And one of the organizations we support, which is A4LI in the United States and Washington, D.C., have been working with the U.S. system and have, as one accomplishment, gotten this in Montana state right to try law passed, which allows people to, given a certain amount of safety proof. Yeah, let's hear it. Oh, thanks. To be able to just go straight forward and start using medicines that have a reasonable safety record, because adults should be able to make their own informed consent, right? But there are also changes afoot at the federal level, and then there are also possible venues around the world that are expedient and can help companies move forward. For instance, we're doing our phase 1 clinical trial in Australia, and they're just really, really good at streamlining the phase 1s for small molecules, which are our first drug is a small molecule for Alzheimer's disease.
Sorry, one quick question, and then I'll ask you for any sort of last remarks. Just on clinical trial recruitment, you're thinking about longevity, et cetera. If you run trials across the world, what you tend to see is that, well, at least in my experience, when I speak to pharmaceutical executives, is people enroll in trials because they need, like, effectively the therapy. It's on offer, it's investigational, it has like a purported effect that's much better than prevailing standard of care. Do you think people are requisitely, if we had this regulatory paradigm where it's like, say for example, we talk about autophagy enhances, this is going to do great things for just your overall biological health. Do we have the right incentive mechanisms? Will people show up so we have adequately powered trials, or do we need to think about things differently? And just also on the data collection side, like the way that you would inform and effectively train your models to, like, with that like real world evidence and data, as opposed to some of the data collection points we might run through sort of acute care, or like what we can manage to get out of biobanks.
I think collecting data on humans is really hard, famously hard. And it's very easy to get fooled into thinking that X does Y in people, because there's a lot of noise in the measurements, unfortunately. So it's super critical to have control groups. I was part of this movement in the US. I actually helped found it at Kevin Kelly's house one day, called Quantified Self, and it was an attempt to try to enable people, this is quite a while ago, try to enable people to learn things about their own biology by measuring it. I think it structurally gave rise to a lot more data collection, which has then been used in some more population levels, like things like Withings, and then like from a lineage perspective, kind of Apple Watch, and then Aura, and those kinds of things. And those are becoming part of clinical trials. But a beautiful thing about clinical trials is they have controls, and it's like it's really hard to separate out placebo effects from
synthetic control arms. Do you think that's going to become a thing?
I think with the right statistical powering, absolutely. But right now, it's like we're kind of like, I would say, on a transition overall, as an industry, and sort of as team human, from the state where we're going from essentially sick care to health care, and the whole infrastructure everywhere essentially is around, I have a disease, how do I cure it? And only in a very few spots have we seen sort of a glimmer of it going sort of the reverse direction, where it's like, well, I might get a disease and I want to prevent it. And we've seen that, but you need a big evidence base for that. And until you have that evidence base, and the only way to collect that evidence base is essentially to have controls. So you have this, imagine these two paradigms. You have the disease modality, where people are coming in like, I have XY, I'm getting early mild cognitive impairment. I'm going to get Alzheimer's. Okay, treat me. And then you have these other people who don't, and don't get treated, and then you have to compare them over time. To a paradigm where someone is just, I want to take this preventatively, and hopefully it will prevent me from going down that road at all. For the people who want to do it preventatively, how do you get a control? There aren't people who will generally walk up to you and say, I want to try this experimental sort of preventative treatment. I know there's some risks, but some benefits, and I'm going to just, I'm going to go for it anyway because I'm a consenting adult. And then I say, okay, I'm going to give you something, but it might be a placebo. They generally say no. So it's very hard to collect actual hard data that you can draw conclusions from in that second paradigm. So it pretty much always has to start in the I'm sick, cure me paradigm to collect the data and then transition later. And that's just the road we're on. And if somebody can think of a way out of that box, I'd be extremely excited.
Well, I mean, isn't that always the inherent tension between like trying to have like good statistical power and inference as opposed to perhaps some of the behavioral elements of clinical trial recruitment, and also the bioethical arguments about people going on placebo if something can effectively help them. Yeah, just one last thing. The panel was talking about it before. When do you think we have this longevity escape velocity moment, or this like sort of, we were speaking, the Turing test moment within longevity? Or what do you think it looks like, I should say?
I think I've started to taste it a little bit. Unfortunately, I think it isn't as purely binary as people might like to think, because the diseases that we're solving now, for instance, as part of Retro and adding 10 years of healthy lifespan, people die on average around 80 now, and so we're working on therapeutics to help people stay healthy 10 years longer, and then die when they're, say, around 90, and that's our mission. And it's a hugely, ridiculously difficult mission, because if you cure cancer, you add like 3 years to healthy lifespan or something. If you work out the statistics, because there's all these other things people die from, or you cure heart disease, maybe 4 years. So 10 years is a lot. I believe that with our next funding round, I will be ready to put a stake in the ground and say we're going to hit our mission 10 years from there. So we're talking 10 years from January 20th, 2026. But that is for how we approach the diseases that people die of when they're 80. At that point, it'll then be our job to figure out how we cure the diseases people die of when they're 90 or 100 or 110, 120. And that's a whole other set of biology. It's different cellular processes or whatever. So in a way, it's kind of a never-ending process, which is exciting because I think life is a journey and not a destination. In terms of, you could sort of define it as sort of local life extension escape velocity, and that is my particular timeline that I'm on.
Love it, and what a neat roadmap, and what a noble mission. Thank